Shrugged family this week on Barbell Shrugged. Dr. Stephanie Estima is coming on the show. If you can hear in the background right now, I'm in an airport. We're traveling. We did a bunch of really cool stuff with some clients this week in Florida, and we're doing show read and intro in this thing in the airport. That's the way you do it sometimes. We're going to be talking about menstrual cycles, menopause, all the female things today. And as always, friends, make sure you get over to rapidhealthreport.com. That is where you can check out all things lab, lifestyle, performance, testing, and analysis that we are going to be hooking you up with inside Rapid Health Optimization. As always, friends, that's over at rapidhealthreport.com. Friends, we won't be in an airport next week. Let's get into the show. Welcome to Barbell Shrugged. I'm Anders Varner, Doug Larson, Coach Travis Mash, Dr. Stephanie Estima. I'm almost positive I mispronounced some sort of accent on Estima.
No, you actually are the first person who is, everyone says estima. So they always think it's like estimate. It's like, no, you think of self-esteem.
Look.
And then you add an A, esteem.
Boom, Anders.
And you did it. You're literally the first person who said it properly.
4 days last week. And now I'm speaking Spanish fluently. Comidas típicas. That means get chicken and rice on a bowl and you're good to go.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Today on Barbell Shrugged, we're going to be talking about all the things that we are not experts in, like menopause, perimenopause, having a perfect period. Before we get into this, I would love to know your story into this path. You are actually, I love that you said before the show started that you kind of had the same mentality that many of us males do, where you go, just suck it up. Like, deal with it.
Suck it up, buttercups, he said.
Now it's,
yeah, I think that was my attitude before. My attitude, when you would hear a perimenopausal woman or a menopausal woman complain, you would sort of like almost give yourself like a lobotomy with how hard you were rolling your eyes. You were like, oh, just whatever, just eat less, move more, just like do it, just do the thing. Don't talk about you can't do the thing, just do the thing. And now, myself being in perimenopause myself, I'm 46, I'll be 47 next month. I have been humbled. I have been humbled by the changes physiologically, emotionally.
I would love to hear the experience of entering or just perimenopause as a whole. Like what happened?
How do you know that you're in perimenopause? When will
besides getting in the car and you're like, roll the windows down.
Yeah,
it's February in Toronto. Stop.
I'll be excited for that moment, though. That'll be nice. Yeah.
I will say before I get into this, I know we were talking a little bit about the people who listen to the show. So a lot of these guys are gym bros. Hello, I'm also a bro. I'm with you. And I think that this information is for women and also for the men who love them, right? So this is for if you have a wife, a daughter, for you to understand some of the changing hormones in her life, you will be able to better connect with her in all the ways that matter to you. So I'm so honored. And also just want to say to all of you, thank you for inviting me on this show, because I think that talking about periods and blood and talking about perimenopause and all the things can be a little bit maybe queasy or off-putting, but it really just speaks volumes about the type of people that you are in terms of your curiosity and your willingness to learn. So I just wanted to say that right from the beginning, thank you very much.
All right.
You're awesome.
Yeah.
Nobody ever congratulates us for being us. Thank you. It's about time, guys.
The other side of that is that I'm much more interested in this topic now that I'm in my 40s. My wife is in her 40s, and so I'm supporting her. And so the more I learn about it, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I'll say for me, my own personal stories, I struggled with my menstrual cycle really for years. So 20s and 30s just had like very difficult. I would classify like I had one good week out of the month, and that was like the week after I stopped my period, right before I ovulated. And then so that's when we talk about the menstrual cycle, there's two sort of main parts of it. The first part is like day one is the day of your bleed, the day you start. It's like Shark Week, right? It's like the day that we start bleeding, and then week two is like you've stopped the period, and then you're you have certain hormones that peak. Testosterone peaks in week two, estrogen peaks in week two. Most women feel very good because these are anabolic hormones. They're firing not just, we know, of course, I'm sure you've talked about this at, almost ad nauseum, but testosterone is not just a sex hormone that is related to reproductive capacity. There are receptors for testosterone and estrogen all through the body, including the brain, including the lungs, including the heart, including all of these vital organs. So most women feel very coordinated, very on, like all fire, all cylinders are firing in week 2. And then she ovulates, and then that moves her into the second half of her cycle, which we call the luteal or luteal phase, depending on the world that part of the world that you're in. And this is really you have to ovulate in order to get into this stage. And then we see a different cacophony, if you will, of hormones there. So you'll see progesterone and you'll see estrogen sort of make a second rise. So if you are a woman who struggles with her period or if you suffer from PMS, the time that you're very likely going to feel those symptoms is after you ovulate. So it's in that second half of the cycle. And that was very much me. So, I would get very like lots of water retention. I couldn't sleep. I was running too hot, mood and affect. I was very emotional. And I'm by default a very logical person, was not a logical person for 2 weeks. A lot of body pains as well. And then my period, so the onset of that follicular phase, also very period, like very heavy flow, lots of things were going on there, like lots of prostaglandins, high inflammation, blah, blah, blah. So I struggled with that for years, and it really wasn't until I started changing my nutrition and changing the way that I train. So I was also like, I competed in, I actually have her right here. I'll just show you. If you're watching this on YouTube, this is my girl. This is my figure competitor trophy. I competed in figure in 2008 in what would be considered today bikini. Like, figure has changed quite a bit, but so I've been like a gym bro. Like I've been in the gym, absolutely loving training for decades, but I still really struggled with this hormonal piece. And it really wasn't until I started changing the way that I eat, the way that I would fast, how much protein, when I would pull back on carbs, like over the course of the cycle, where I started to get some really like some reprieve from those symptoms that I just was detailing. And then the same thing with training. So like I said, in that week 2, when you're sort of firing on all cylinders, like that's the time you have a lot of motor coordination that week. That is absolutely a great time for strength gains, for PRs, PBs, like your personal best, your personal records in the gym. That's a really great time for it. Not so much in the luteal phase when you're a little bit more clumsy. A lot of women will report like they walk into a room and they don't remember why, or they're dropping their keys out of their, like, for no reason. They're tripping, all these different things that we see. So we're typically a little more clumsy in the second half of the cycle. And yeah, so that's my story. And then wrote a book on it, released it in 21. Got actually a lot of flack from it, from people like, this isn't real. There's no such thing as, no such thing as changing the way that you eat and the way that you train. Some of these sort of online trolls that we see sometimes. And
Yeah.
I lovingly call them my trolls, because they're really my greatest source of content. So it's like, if I'm hitting a nerve, I know I'm doing something right. And now I'm writing a book, like I mentioned before we got going, on perimenopause, like some of the changes, like the body composition changes, the sex hormone changes, some of the mood and affect stuff, the hot flashes, like you mentioned. It's like, it's Toronto, it's February, but she wants the window down, But what's going on with that thermal regulation? So I know it's a long answer, but that's
did you say that week 1 is when the bleed begins?
Yes.
That's the beginning.
Yes, got it. Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So week 1, the first day of your, like the first
Taking
day
notes.
that you see blood. Yeah. First day that you see blood, that's day 1 of your cycle. And I think the other thing, follicular. Yeah. You are taking notes. I love this, Travis. That's awesome.
I don't mess. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't mess around. No, you don't mess around. Gold star on your chart. So, yeah. So bleed week, first day that you see blood is the first day of your cycle. Most women will have a cycle somewhere between 26 and 33 days. Like we often talk about it in 28, just because it's divisible by week, like it's divisible by 7 really easily. But there's some natural, normal variation there. If your cycle is 30 days, that doesn't mean you have a wrong menstrual cycle. Like you're just your ovaries are releasing every 30 days. It's fine.
On the nutrition side of things, how should people, specifically females, kind of like change their diet throughout that month?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the first thing I'll say is it's partly dependent on your goals. The majority of women that I come across want to lose fat in some capacity. They say they want to lose weight, but what they really mean is they want to reduce their adiposity, right? They want to lose fat, and maybe they want to put on some muscle. So one of the things that I like to talk about in the follicular phase, Travis, right? So the day that we start bleeding up until we ovulate, so that first 2 weeks, if you're somebody who likes fasting, we tend to be less hungry in the first half of the cycle. So if you wanted to, you can think about pushing fasting a little longer. I typically don't fast more than 12 hours at any point in my cycle. Even that sometimes is a bit long for me. But if you wanted to fast a little bit longer, you can think about pushing it then. You can also pull back a little bit on the carbs that those 2 weeks as well. More coming from the position of like a hormetic, like a stressor to the body. It's a sort of form of caloric restriction. If the goal of the woman is that she wants to lose some weight, sometimes when we temporarily, double underline temporarily, not permanently, temporarily restrict carbohydrates, we can sometimes see a drop in water weight or just some extra sort of bloat that she might be carrying. So those first 2 weeks of the cycle are a great time for that. I'm a big advocate for protein. I've talked a lot about protein, especially as we age. It's probably the only macronutrient that changes. Like our requirements actually go up for protein as we age. So if you're kind of in that drop zone, 35, 40, 45, you really want to be thinking about a minimum of 30 grams of protein per meal, evenly spread out through the day. Like don't have 150 grams at breakfast and then just have carbs for the rest of the day. Like kind of split it up into, your meals over the day. But dosing protein, like spacing out the bolus of protein over the course of the day, super important for muscle protein synthesis. That's another, if a woman wants to gain muscle, we want to like mechanically stimulate the muscle tissue in the gym, but we also want to chemically stimulate it in the kitchen, right? So we want to be able to get the protein requirements for her that are appropriate to stimulate muscle growth and kind of pair that with resistance training as well.
Do women often find that they become they have like fewer cravings for protein specifically? Like it gets harder to eat protein as they get older?
Yes. Yeah, because I mean, everyone, men and women, our digestive tract ages, right? So the digestive lining, the lumen of the sort of essentially the digestive system, like a really cool fact, it's technically not inside the body. The only time that something is inside the body is once it passes across the digestive tract layer and into the plasma, like into the blood. So we're basically like a tube, right? So when you have the food coming in, there's a very thin what's called an epithelial lining of the digestive tract. And that sort of gets trashed as we age, right? So as many things sort of become more dysregulated, there's more entropy, there's more kind of craziness that happens as we age. So a lot of women, I do find, first, we've been conditioned that protein is just like fire, barbecue, man, meat. Like we think that it's like not a female thing to be having meat or, protein. I think creatine is another one that I think ladies are just like, oh, that's just like for the guys in the tank tops at the gym with the 6 plates on the leg press. That's just for those
everyone
guys,
needs
right?
to be a meathead.
Yeah, right,
You're more
right.
comfortable with it.
Well, I think, before we got started, you said something really great. You said like everyone has to have like a certain percentage of meathead in them, which I love. And I think for women, we have to really embrace our, maybe our inner meathead or whatever. Like creatine and protein is not just for men, it's absolutely for women as well. But to, your original question was, protein and do we have a hard time with it? And I think everybody as we age, if you are not if you're not practicing some of the things that we've been talking about, the resistance training, and your system is not used to having protein, having a large dose of protein is actually going to be very difficult for your body to first like break down the protein and then to assimilate the amino acids to kind of do its thing. So yeah, I think there's maybe some gentleness. There's a case to be made for like slowly increasing your protein, like not just going from like 40 grams of protein a day to 120. Like that's probably going to lead to a lot of GI distress, a lot of pain, maybe some distension, bloating, all the things. So can we slowly increase your protein intake? Absolutely. And should there be a target for your protein? Probably, if you're working in pounds, like, 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. If you're a kilogram kind of person, it's like 0.7 grams per kg of body weight. There are good sort of places to start.
Yeah. How about the training? How does that vary, if any, throughout the month?
I love this question. Okay. So the first principle before we even think about how things change is no matter what, we are approximating muscle failure. So you guys know this, right? Like
Yeah.
preaching, like talking to the choir, right? So we don't have to get to muscle failure, although I think it is fun sometimes to kind of see what that looks like and feels like. But you can approximate muscle failure irrespective of reps, irrespective of weight, right? I'm a big advocate for heavy weight that approximates muscle failure with an RIR of 1 to 3. So you've probably talked about RIRs or
Agreed.
RPEs
Yeah.
before, right? So
They have
reps
to
in
try really
reserve, one to
hard.
three. Yeah, you got to try really hard. Like, and so the way, so I always get asked this question too. So before I kind of get into the mechanics of like week one, you do this, week two, muscle failure looks like this. It looks like your velocity is slowing down. Like,
Oh,
rep
you
one,
just
you're,
did
you
you see the look on Mash's face when she said velocity? Oh my gosh.
Nice.
were
All
there
my post
hearts?
grad
Were
work
there
has been
hearts
done
coming
on
out of your eyes?
velocity.
Yeah, if we had emojis right now, that man would
Shout out Jim Ware.
be
Yeah.
like a Valentine's Day emoji coming out of him right now.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love when I can get the heart emoji from my gym
Man,
bros. Yeah, so velocity
man.
slows down, right? Set one doesn't look like, or rep one doesn't look like rep 12 or whatever
Yeah.
reps that you're doing. The perceived weight of the perceived weight also goes up. Yeah, there we go.
Everybody that can't see it, Mash
had
just
to.
actually
got
did
the
the
hearts.
emojis.
I literally just hit the heart emoji. I did that.
Oh,
So
that's too
again,
good.
rep 12, it feels
Yeah.
really heavy, right? Rep 12 does not feel like rep one. It feels like the perception of the weight is much heavier. That's
Right.
what it looks like. And then you can subjectively ask yourself, like, hey, how many more reps could I do? Right? Maybe your full range, maybe you can't do full range anymore. Maybe you're allocated to like the long length. Do you guys talk about long length partials at all here? We talk about long lengths at all?
I mean,
Like,
I have. I don't know if we've done it on here before because
No.
it's a great idea.
yeah.
Like for example,
Okay.
just
Yeah.
she's talking about being in the bottom of a squat and
Yeah.
coming
In
up
the
just part
stretch
of the way and
position.
going back down. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the latest thing.
Yeah,
It's
I
a really
didn't get
good
a heart
thing.
emoji on that one, so I'm a little
No, it's a
disappointed.
good
I
one
gotta say,
though.
yeah,
That was a good one.
yeah. So long length,
Velocity
like
really.
velocity and the
Uh,
perception of the weight. That's how
yeah.
you know you're getting to failure. And then for me, like let's say it's a squat. We'll use the squat as the example. I can't necessarily get all the way down in the hole anymore, or I get stuck. So then what I might do is I might do like maybe I'll do actually partials on the top there. So that's not a good idea. Okay, you know what? I'll give you like a hamstring curl. So I'm on the hamstring curl machine, and I can't do a full range of motion anymore. And so I'll do like a couple of like reps in the stretch position when my legs are straight to about let's say 30 degrees of flexion. And I'll kind of do that until I can't anymore. And the literature is still like not, full range of motion, I think is always king or queen, right? It's always like the best thing. You always want to go through full range of motion. It's not just for the muscle, but it's also for the joint and the cartilage and the
Yeah.
tendons and all that. You always want to preserve your range of motion in the joint. But when you can't do the full range anymore, I think there is an argument to be made for like kind of finishing the muscle in a in that stretch position. Another one is like a lat
I
row. Like
agree.
when you're
Totally.
reaching up, like I can't do the full range anymore, like after whatever rep. So I'll kind of in the stretch position, I'll sort of reach up and like do whatever I can until I can't do that anymore.
Yeah. There's a lot of good literature that say like you can maximize hypertrophy, tendons. It's really good for tendons, especially.
Yeah.
We talked about
Okay,
this.
so all that
with
first.
Brian Bornstein.
Sorry,
Who was it?
Brian Bornstein. We did an episode on
Yeah,
that.
that's right.
We
That's
talked a lot
exactly
about that on
right.
that show, but outside of that, we haven't really talked about it too much on Barbell Shrugged.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's like the first thing. It's like it doesn't matter what week you're in. You have to be working the muscle to approximate failure. So RIR of 1 to 3, RPE of 8 to 10. Then you can play around with, if you're a woman in her fertile years, I'll say that irrespective of whether you want babies, your biology is wired to optimize for fertility. So when we're thinking about training, keeping in mind that we're always working to muscle failure, what I often find for women, let's say in their first week, so bleed week, so week 1 to day 7, let's say, a lot of times, especially in the first couple of days of her period, maybe there's like some cramping, like the uterus is contracting, she's expelling, the lining of the uterus or whatever, which is actually what the period is. So there can be a lot of like fatigue, pain, her capacity to push herself is not quite there. So I often will recommend something like an 8 to 12 rep range. So again, making sure that rep 12, like you're done like dinner, right? So you're finished there, but you don't have it's not as mentally taxing, let's say, as like a 5 rep set, right? So like when we're really lifting very heavy weights, which would be my recommendation for the second week. So you finish your period, now you're in week 2, testosterone and estrogen are kind of peaking. This is really when we can train for strength. And certainly we know that hypertrophy and strength are technically two different outcomes, but they sort of correlate with each other, right? So I like in week 2 for there to be like 5 to 7, maybe 5 to 8 for your set length. But that means that to do 5 reps or 7 reps, like it has to be pretty heavy. There has to be some jump in weight compared to the first week. Week 3, we've ovulated. We're starting to get potentially, if a woman is dealing with that PMS or some of those sort of like those pro-inflammatory symptoms, we can kind of return to that 8 to 12 rep range for her. And then in week 4, I like to have actually longer sets. So if you are going to be inflamed, if you're going to be feeling crappy, it's in week 4, right before your period starts. So contracting the muscle more often. So let's say a 15 rep set or a 20 rep set or a 25 rep set, even a 30 rep set, although it's really long, but muscle hypertrophy happens anywhere between 5 to 30 reps. We know that from literature. So let's say it's like a 15 to 20 rep set, let's say. You're going to get more contraction from the muscles. And of course, the muscles are not just beautiful to look at. They're also endocrine organs, right? So they will release things into the bloodstream that help with reducing inflammation. They're called myokines. I'm sure you guys have talked about myokines here before, but they're these basically anti-inflammatory chemicals that help to bring down inflammation. So a woman who's feeling like really puffy, really gross, like she's like lots of water, her husband's annoying her, everything's bothering her partner, whatever, having a bit like decreasing the weight but increasing the volume for her in that week can be really helpful in reducing inflammation. So it's like you're kind of dosing all through the month. You're sort of dosing the volume based on kind of the hormonal environment.
I feel like that might help too with I could be wrong, but like with the, you said earlier, week 3, you might feel clumsy, like the
right.
cognitive decline maybe, because I feel like the guy we had on who was talking about learning and all that, he talked about myokines, pretty sure,
cool.
about how we, it's how the muscles communicate with the brain as well. So the way that strength training will help with cognitive improvements is through myokines as well. One of the ways.
Well, they're called the molecules of hope, right? So that's sort of their nickname.
I haven't heard that, molecules of hope.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah. And that's one of the things, like if you're feeling really awful, one of the sort of jokes that I sort of make like tongue in cheek is like half joking, half truth, as all jokes are. It's like every 4 weeks, my husband, I'm like, why does his chewing bother me? Like it's just every 4 weeks. He just like the way he chews just bothers me. It's like, oh, that's because I'm in week 4. Okay, good. I'm just going to check myself before I wreck myself. And then, but what I do is I get to the gym, right? I get to the gym and I train and I do higher volume and I release those myokines, and then all is well in the world again, right? Like I have that renewed sense of pride from doing a workout that I maybe didn't feel like doing. I feel, more in love with my husband. I feel better in my own body. All that sort of works itself
Getting
out.
jacked is the answer.
Yes, getting jacked. Exactly.
This is such a good podcast, man. This is I mean, like I'm learning. It's just how do I relay this information to my wife? That's the question. And all the men listening, don't go telling your wife that this stuff now. You better be smart. Learn from the old guy here.
Always ask questions.
Maybe ask your wife to listen to this one, not to. Don't go telling her. Don't mansplain to her tonight, guys. You get that ass whipped is what'll happen.
So can you take that whole process, that whole summary, week 1, 2, 3, 4, as far as fluctuations in training volume and rep ranges and all that, and just like quickly summarize that so we can picture again?
Yeah, sure. So week 1, I would say 8 to 12. First, actually, let me just back up and say always auto regulate. Check in with yourself. If you're in week 1 and you actually feel like going hard, like you do you, boo. But generally, week 1, 8 to 12. Week 2, 5 to 8. Week 3, we're coming back to that 8 to 12, 8 to 15. And then week 4, we're going to increase our volume and go 15 to 20, 25. Yeah, something like that.
It's kind of like medium low, medium high.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And all of them, like I said before, you're still working to failure. So you're still adhering to the principles of hypertrophy, right? Which is should be every woman's goal. This is not just for the guys. I mean, guys, yes, muscles look absolutely beautiful on men, but they look beautiful on women as well. And we cannot afford, like, it just needs to be in our, we need to, all women need to know what an RPE is. We all need to know what an RIR is. We all need to know that we should be taking 5 mgs of creatine a day. These are things that are principles that apply both to men and women that are going to help with our physiology and, help us feel better in ourselves. And it's really, at least my experience in talking to women, like even myself, like I grew up in the cardio section of the gym, right? Like I was on the elliptical for like,
Yeah.
I was spending so much time in the car. So I really want women to sort of move from being these, like I like to say, like cardio bunnies to like moving to becoming
Yeah, me
muscle
too.
muscle mommies. Like I want you to be a muscle mommy. Like it's so beautiful to have muscle, and it's like not something you can buy. You can't order it
Yeah.
on Amazon or order it in from Uber. Like it needs consistency and dedication. And in the process of building muscle, you also find who you are and what you're made of, right? So it also forges like all the other benefits of
Yeah.
mental health and mental strength and voluntarily putting yourself in you're voluntarily making your muscles approximate failure. Like that's not necessarily a normal thing.
Yeah.
So
No, but it should be, man. I'm so glad that my daughter get to grow up with a mom that loves to have muscles,
yes.
and she gets to grow up around all the women that I coach who love muscles. So she'll never be in a family that
Yeah.
gives society's, regurgitates society's thoughts on what a woman should look like. A woman should look like whatever she wants to look like, but muscle is definitely going to be celebrated in our home.
Yeah, your daughter is so lucky. And I would say that, like, I have sons and I'm starting to train with my sons are teenagers. I'm starting to train with my older teenager, which is like such a joy for me.
That's
But it's
super
also
cool. Yeah.
it's for our daughters too, right? It's for the generation that's coming up behind us. Like we were taught, I sort of grew up in like the Kate Moss era of the
Yeah.
supermodel, like super waif, like androgynous, like no curves. And I never looked like that. I was like, well, my thighs, they're always going to touch. And I got a big, I got curves, right? So,
Thank God.
like,
Yeah.
and thank God. But when I was
Yeah.
growing up, it was skinny, like skinny, 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 skinny. And I would love for the women in my generation to really shed that archetype of skinny and really adopt a new one of being strong, right? I think that
Amen.
being like strong is the
Yeah.
new skinny. If it's like 30 is the new
Heck
whatever.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Like,
Since
yeah.
my
I
little
never
girl popped
understood that
out, I've
skinny thing.
only called her Little Diesel. She's got to be
Yeah.
jacked. The
That's
only
it.
Yeah,
way.
Yeah.
man.
The only way to
Jacked,
do it.
lean, and tanned. That's it.
Just
That's the motto.
My
yeah,
daughter has no chance of
brainwashing
being
them.
like, she's going to be. She has no, with a mom and dad, like
Yeah.
she has zero chance of that,
She's
like
so
Kate
lucky.
Moss.
She's
Yeah.
so lucky. She's so lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's gonna have a big caboose, and that's, you're welcome. I'm gonna tell her early, you're welcome. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll be dead someday, but you're welcome.
I always say for
She does
women, it's like we want big glutes and we also want
Yeah.
glute-sized delts. We want we want big
Yeah, I
glutes and we
know.
want delts that match. Yeah.
Thank God,
Yeah.
what was that? Our buddy Brent Contreras makes his living off making
Oh,
women's
oh
butts
yeah, yeah, yeah,
bigger.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Applaud. I mean,
Yeah.
he got it right, man.
Hat tip
We
to you, sir.
failed,
Yeah.
no doubt.
You,
Like
you,
I'm,
you briefly
yeah.
mentioned the cardio side of this. How does that play into it? Any fluctuations with how you should approach cardio week to week?
Yeah, this is a great question. So first I'll just say cardio is cardio, right? Like I much prefer training, but I do see
Me too.
I do see the value, like especially as we age, right? So as women lose estrogen, we also lose that cardioprotective affect, that ability to vasodilate and vasoconstrict. Like estrogen has a really prominent role in sort of the suppleness of our arteries, and so you do need to maintain that with maintaining your cardiorespiratory fitness. However, Doug, like you very intelligently just said, for a woman in her fertile years, that fluctuation of estrogen certainly affects the vasodilation and constriction of our arteries, but also estrogen also has a direct effect on our ligaments and our tendons. So it can make our ligaments a bit more lax. So this is like just a technical term that means like a bit more loosey-goosey, and it can make our tendons a bit stiffer. So what that means is that we are very well suited when estrogen peaks for very heavy resistance training, which is in week 2, why I talk about this like 5 to 8 rep set, because the tendon, which is basically the extension of the muscle that's pulling on the bone, gets stiffer under the surging estrogen. But our ligaments, so the ligaments in our knees, the ligaments in our shoulders, they become a little bit more loosey-goosey. So we are a little bit more susceptible to injury this time as well. And actually, if you look at female athletes, you'll probably find that in their reproductive years, they have a much higher incidence of like ACL injuries, things of that nature. Because especially when you see explosive type, like when you see sprinters, for example, where it's a burst activity, a lot of times you'll see a lot of knee damage. And if you start to track it over the course of her menstrual cycle, when she's injured is usually in week 2. So the only thing I'll say is if you are like an Orange Theory, you pray to the Church of Orange Theory or whatever, I would just say you can dial
What is
back.
that? I don't even know what you mean.
Orange Theory is like
You don't know what Orange Theory is?
It's like a
I mean,
gym.
I know the
like,
gym, but
like-
I don't know what their
It's
principles
all
are.
high intensity. It's all
Yeah, it's
high
like
intensity
soft
training.
CrossFit.
Yeah. Yeah. So they'll
I
like they'll
hope
do
I
like
didn't offend anybody
circuits.
by saying that.
Yeah. And it's like no
Probably
offense
did.
to Orange Theory, but I do know women that are there 4, 5, and 6 times a week. And
a
they're like,
lot.
I don't know why I'm getting like a belly and like
It's
like,
not even
well,
high intensity. It's like moderate because you just can't do that high intensity for an hour.
well, I mean, that's
Yeah.
the thing
No
too, right?
chance.
Can we talk about that
Yeah.
for a minute? Like true high intensity is like 30 seconds.
It's like running a
At
5K.
best.
Beyond
best.
30 at bet like
Yeah.
like Usain Bolt at best, right? So
At
30
best.
30 seconds maximally, and then we're into like you've already exhausted the
You've already
acute
started
contract-
slowing down at 30 seconds.
100%. Yes.
If you hold top speed for 30 seconds,
Yes.
stop what you're doing. Call me. Let's go to the Olympics.
Yeah,
like,
you're not really doing high intensity.
Yeah,
But these
dude.
classes are like 45 minutes. So what people do is they say, okay, I'm going to budget this much for this sprint.
Exactly.
This much for like they don't actually do all out, balls to the wall, like high
No.
intensity. They sort of dial it back because they know they have to last for 45 more minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're talking to the person beside you, you're not high intensity.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
If you're not getting to where you can't talk, then it's not high intensity at all.
Completely. Yeah. So I would just say for anybody who absolutely loves like these high intensity classes, not just Orange Theory, but just in general, I would dial it back in that second week, in week 2 of the cycle, just because this is when we see there's 2 main peaks of estrogen. One is in week 2. We get kind of a smaller one in the luteal phase, but it's not as pronounced as it is in week 2. So I just say dial back the hit. In week 2, but all other times, once or twice a week, I think hit is great. I think that we should be trying to aim for like 150 minutes of like moderate, zone 2, 3. If we're talking in zones, like zone 2, 3-ish activity. Yeah, just find something that like walking with a weighted vest that can get you into zone 2 as well. Yeah.
So many notes. What is your book? I guess we'll do that at the end, but I'm for sure gonna get the book.
Yeah, it's called The Betty
Make it happen.
Body. Yeah,
it's
called
the what?
The Betty Body. So
The
it's named
Betty
after
Body.
Yeah.
Is
So
that
it's
Betty?
yeah, I'll show you. Actually, I have like a little
there you
thing here.
go.
I'll show you here. So this is it, The Betty Body. So it's like purple dress, pink background. My podcast is called Better with Dr. Stephanie. So my Betties are, my listeners, my community, they started calling themselves Betties, and I was like, oh, that's pretty juicy. So we'll just go with that. So
Go
the
with
Betty
it.
Body is really it's like a love letter to my community, like on how to understand your cycle and how to attune your movement and your nutrition and your stress to your menstrual cycle. So that's the book. The subtitle is A Geeky Goddess's Guide to Intuitive Eating, Balanced Hormones, Transformative Sex. Yeah.
Sounds like you know your audience very well.
Transformative sex. You got me on.
Yeah.
They should have led with that. I'm buying
Should
it
have
for
led
sure.
with that. Screw all this muscle building crap. Let's
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah, transformative sex got me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is, and the other thing too with women is like we've also been taught like sex is like, for at least I can talk about my own raised Roman Catholic, it's like you own like it's sex is just for marriage, it's not for pleasure or anything like that. But when you actually look at the design of a human body, it tells a bit of a different story. And then of course physiologically, we know that when we are orgasming, when we are connecting with someone, we get this beautiful secretion of oxytocin, which is that love hormone, that bonding hormone. We get dopamine, we get serotonin, we get endorphins, all these beautiful
Best
things that
drug of all
happen.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the best drug of all time. Like I can get, and there's nothing that makes you feel more connected. I mean, you're so vulnerable, right? Like this is the most vulnerable if you're with a partner, let's say. You're your most vulnerable. And what a beautiful thing if you are in a nourishing, healthy, loving relationship to be able to totally let your guard down and be free. I can't think of a better strategy to balance your hormones actually
Yeah.
than that. Yeah.
Me
So I think,
either.
yeah.
Wait, so
Let's
what do you?
transition. Go.
Oh,
Sorry to
Wait, wait.
finish.
what? What?
Yeah,
Oh,
How?
exactly.
yeah.
We're talking about
Well, I was
sex,
gonna
man.
get back
Started
to the
Stay right
menopause.
here. Stay right here.
here.
No.
Regarding hormones and libido and sex drive, like what are
Yeah.
optimal hormones? Like what's like a natural change that you should expect, and there's kind of quote unquote nothing you can do about it. And like what do you actually have some amount of control of using lifestyle factors, nutrition, and all the things we normally talk about on the show versus like hormone replacement therapy or any other
Yeah.
method that might
Yeah. So
Great
I,
question. Here we go.
and this is we're talking about perimenopausal change, the menopausal change, et cetera there, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say, and I'll state my bias. I think that there can be a marriage of both the pharmacology, which is hormone replacement therapy, and the lifestyle. And you can't really have one without the other. Like you can't be gaining weight, and doing nothing with your nutrition and just get on some estrogen and progesterone and think that that's going to solve your problems. Like it will solve some things. It will solve maybe your sleep. Like progesterone is very well known for helping to modulate sleep. Estrogen can help with the the hot flashes that a lot of women complain about, but you're not really going to get the body composition changes. Like you got to work for that. Like that has to be created in the gym. So some of the things that we can expect, and I think, Travis, you asked this at the beginning, like when does perimenopause, like it was an off the cuff question. I don't think I answered it. It was like, when does it even start? Like when does perimenopause even start? And usually I'll say somewhere around mid to late 30s, we start to enter into that perimenopausal transition. And the reason why I say that is because that is when we start to see, if you're collecting data, like if you're doing blood work, you will start to see your progesterone levels start to dip. It's not a sudden dip, but it is a steady and a relatively reliable and predictable drop in progesterone, such that in your early 40s, now you might start having women saying like, I can't sleep. I'm waking up. It's either like they can't fall asleep or they can't stay asleep. It's like usually one of those two things or both. The
Well,
other
it could be
thing,
like a 10-year process, right?
yes, 100%. So the average age of onset for menopause is about 51. So if you
Mm,
think about that, like you're like mid to late 30s, you start to see progesterone drop, and then in your 40s, your estrogen and testosterone follow suit. So
mm,
as you said, Doug, it can be like a 10, sometimes a 15-year process. Like it's not nothing. Like it's a pretty significant part of a woman's life.
mm,
And so we can see the progesterone, we see sleep disturbances usually first. It's usually not like people think that, perimenopause is like hot flashes and irregular periods, and those things are really late signs. Like it's usually you'll see that late 40s, early 50s.
mm,
Usually it's sleep. People will notice sleep. And then the other thing is like the anxiety and mood regulation starts to go. So
mm,
they'll all of a sudden be way more anxious, maybe more anxious about their kids, or like regular problems that they, have been able to deal with in the past seem very overwhelming for her.
mm,
And that's a little bit harder to identify because it's subtle, right? It's a little bit more subtle. Like she's maybe a little bit more irritated. She's a little bit more agitated. So
mm,
it really requires her to be even tracking her cycle or tracking her symptoms to be able to identify that kind of change, because sometimes it's so slow and subtle that she doesn't realize it until she's hot flashing, she's getting a divorce, she's screaming at her kids all the time, like all that stuff. So, and this is why I say like this information is like so important for men as well, not in a condescending way. Like you're not going to leave this conversation, be like, let me tell you, I think you're in perimenopause. Like you probably need your progesterone. Like you're not going to do it,
Seems like a good
hopefully
tactic.
you're not going to do that, but for you to understand that this drop in hormones is not nothing. Like it's a significant impact on her brain, on her heart, on her lungs, on her you know, her reproductive system, on her body like her whole body is changing. So
Mhm.
progesterone starts, and then we will start to see often in the 40s, we start to see like kind of estrogen just goes on this like wild, like you're on a, you know, you're on the back of you're on a rodeo. It's like up and down and up and down and up and down. Like some months you're too much estrogen, some months you're not enough. And that's really when a lot of women will start to say like, I have raging PMS, like out of nowhere, or I am raging, like I am so angry, everything is so, you know, everything is bothering me so much. And usually that's because like her ovaries are just failing to produce the right amount of estrogen. Some months it's too much, some months it's too little, and then she just kind of feels like she's losing her mind, like she feels like she's losing control of her body. And then testosterone kind of has a slower, but also, you know, a decline as well. And then at that, when she does go through menopause, which is 12 consecutive months, no period, her hormones are now at like 1% of what they once were.
Wow.
So one of the things to like kind of keep in mind is like you as her husband or her partner are, if she doesn't have hormone replacement therapy, literally are going to have you will have more estrogen than she will. You are going to have more testosterone.
Mm.
I mean, you already do, but you will
Yeah.
have more sex hormones than she will. So I think that there is, so that's kind of what to expect. And any coach who understands perimenopause can kind of lay this out for her women or his, or, you know, whoever the coach is for their client. And then think about some of the lifestyle changes that we can make. So we've already talked a lot about weightlifting. This is probably the most important thing from a lifestyle perspective that we can do for our beautiful women. It's like teach her to lift heavy, teach her to approximate failure, full range of motion, because muscle really is our metabolic currency. It helps with mobility, but it also helps. It's the primary site for glucose utilization, for fat utilization. It is how, if you're having a carby meal and you have like a good amount of muscle mass, like your muscles are kind of going to sop that up a little bit. It's also when you're training, your muscles, if you are, let's say, lifting weights, you're going to get a transient rise in testosterone, like natural endogenous, like your own production of testosterone after the lift, right? Depending on how fit you are, that, you know, the more fit you are, the shorter it lasts. But let's say 10 hours to anything up to like 48 hours after your session, you can have a transient rise in testosterone, which is really great for your brain. It's great for your body composition. It's great for your thermal regulation, fat, you know, all the things. So muscle is really the first thing that she needs to start doing. Hiring a coach, like all the, you know, all of the people that you have on the show, all of the things that you're talking about, I think that she should be following. It's not just bro science. It's like, you know, it's bros and I don't know, actually maybe not hoes, but something like
Not
pals and
that.
gal. Yeah, like something
Yeah.
like that. Like my friend, my kids' friend group, it's like pals before gals. I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. That's like the pre-bros before. Okay. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, it's like for girls, it's for women and for men that we should be lifting heavy. Um, and then the other thing I'll say around muscle is anything that your muscles do, your bones also follow suit, right? So what we want to do for our bones as we age, particularly with women, is we want to keep them really dense. We want to keep them really thick. One of the things that happens in the absence of estrogen and testosterone is that our bones get very brittle. So you trip and fall down the stairs, or you live on the East Coast, as I do, and there's ice outside and you slip and fall.
Yeah.
We want to have the bones to have the
Yeah.
resiliency to withstand that blunt force trauma, right? We want to be able to fall on the hip and not to have the hip shatter. So weightlifting is not only important from an aesthetic point of view, but it's also from a functional and longevity, you know, health span point of view as well. So that would be like the biggest thing I can say, like just get in the gym and do something, hire a trainer if it's available to you, learn the movement patterning, you know, squats, like everyone talks about squats. No one can really do them well. Like it's a very technical lift. So get someone who kind of understands female mechanics. Like pelvis is wider than a man's. We have a greater Q angle. Like our knees are going to collapse more than a guy's will on a squat, let's say. So learn how to squat well. And then the other thing is like the food that we've been talking about, like protein. You gotta be getting in your protein. Get in touch with your inner protein shake, right? If it's hard for you to
Yeah.
get all that chicken and beef and all that in there, there's lots of whey protein, beef isolate, like there's a lot of different ways that you can get protein in a way that's gentle on the stomach as well.
Yeah, I don't think I could even get I've never been able to eat enough just straight chicken. I've always had to supplement. Like, I'm just
Yeah,
not a huge
I do
eater,
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I put some Greek yogurt. I put in a little bit, like I put in a scoop of my protein, which is about 25 grams of protein. And then you get the Greek yogurt, which is, probably 17 to 20 grams. So already I'm at like
Boom.
almost 40 grams, right?
Right.
It's a beautiful meal. It's very filling,
Yeah.
some honey, some nuts, and it's like a lovely, lovely little thing.
Yeah.
Lovely little
Do
thing.
you know
Yeah.
when they started doing research on perimenopause? Like how long ago was it that this
Research
became
well or research done poorly?
well, for sure. A lo- I guess why I'm interested in this is um anytime I feel like I'm trying to like problem solve health, fitness, things like that, it's kind of like let's
Yeah.
just go back before all this stuff was like easy, like before there were gyms, before there like we ran a lot, we sprinted a lot, we
Yeah.
lifted things in nature, we were always barefoot. That's probably the way that our physiology was like designed to operate
Yeah.
in a much more like natural way. Um, I don't know how much further back we would need to go from where we are in technological advancements now and medicine, but um, I guess I was just curious, like, have you read anything that what happened in menopausal, like how was it treated or what was the conversation? Any research from before HRT was like a thing? And
Yeah.
how did women navigate this time of life from going from fertile to infertile, and then like what were the kind of the health topics around that, if any?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, and I think that there's a couple of pertinent points in the timeline in terms of women's health and women's research.
Yeah.
I would say currently we can start maybe today and work our way backwards. I think I just read it was last week. It was like 9% of the funding last year went towards women's research, which is like really sad, right? So
Yeah.
I think that we don't know what we don't know. I think there needs to be a lot more research around it. There was a very big study done in 2002 called the Women's Health Initiative. And it's unfortunate because they really butchered the study and they really put
Oh.
it was, and I don't think it like the cost associated, I don't think that we'll ever see a replication of it, but they had basically taken women who were well past menopause. So they were maybe 65, 70. So they like, 10 plus years after the onset of menopause, all happened to be obese. Many of them were smokers. So if we think about cardiovascular risk, it's like obesity, smoking, age, right? It's like number one, two, and three in
Yeah.
terms of risk, and then put them on what's called Premarin, which is pregnant mare urine, Premarin, which is supposed to have like conjugated estrogens and synthetic progesterones and such. And what they did was they actually halted the study early because they saw an increase in breast cancer. So this is kind of the big thing that we still see has residue today. A lot of women who were on HRT in and around the 2000s were abruptly taken off because the sensationalization in the media was like, HRT causes breast cancer. You need to get off this immediately. And we still see that fear today. Like we still even have physicians who, if as a woman, if you go to your primary healthcare provider and say, hey, like I'm 46 or I'm 51, whatever age, and I'm starting to notice some changes, I would like to, explore progesterone or estrogen or combination. It depends on whether or not you have a uterus or not. There's a couple of different ways that we do it, but many physicians will say, oh, no, that causes breast cancer, or like, no, you don't need it. You're fine. Like you don't need. So
Same
we
people
still.
putting all the 13-year-olds on birth control.
Right, right. And you actually get a lot of
That's terrifying.
perimenopausal women on birth control. So they'll offer the birth control pill to a 49-year-old or a 51-year-old
Yeah.
woman instead of HRT. And they'll say, oh, well, it's low dose estrogen, implying that estrogen, like that why are we vilifying estrogen? Like that. Anyway, so there's so many things I
Yeah.
have an issue with the birth control pill. To your point,
Yeah.
13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds on birth control pill for decades without any reprieve, any long-term data to support that practice. Um, you know, I could go on and on about the birth
Yeah.
control pill. I have an axe to grind there, but yeah. So I think I think that we need, so there's that. And then, you were asking about sort of prior to HRT, some of the things that I often will hear is like, oh, well, the only reason why women live, like we're one of the only species that live past our fertile capacity, right? So I think it's humans, giraffes, and then there's some, I forget the fish. It's like I don't, it's like a dolphin or something. I forget what it is, but there's like three
Yeah.
species that sort of live into menopause. It's like, well, why don't we just die off? Because we have sort of exhausted our, from an evolutionary standpoint or a
Yeah.
teleological standpoint, like, why are you still here? You've sort of given birth or you
I've
haven't.
never
Like,
thought about that. It's very interesting. Yeah.
yeah. So there's something that's been proposed called the grandmother hypothesis, which I think is really interesting,
Yeah.
which is to say that women who live, the reason why many women live past their reproductive capacity, human females, is to help with the to help being like help be a grandmother.
Yeah.
We all know, I mean, if you have wives with children, we all know how taxing it can be
No
to raise a
doubt.
child in isolation. So grandmother comes in to give mom a break, to play with the like, so she's no longer reproductive, but she's incredibly productive in her community, in her
Yeah.
connections with her community.
If
So
I was evolution, I would say you're right.
yeah, it's like
I live
we
near
need
my
more
mom, and
grandmas.
it
Yeah,
is
we need more grandmas.
massively
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah. So
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
that might be why we live. Like some people say, oh, it's just because of medicine. That's why we're all living longer. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that there's some productivity, um, and some,
And old men wouldn't know what to do. We would
right.
lose our minds. We would have no clue. We would just
With
start
just
chopping
by
trees down for no
ourselves? Oh
reason. I
yeah.
don't know. I'm just stuck here.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I think that I always say, for women, I'm like, yes, maybe you're training for your bikini body, but you're also training for your old lady body. Like you want to be able to lift that 10-pound baby up, get on the floor, play with them on the floor, and be able
Yeah.
to get back up off the floor,
I
take the baby
saw
to the
that.
park.
I
Yeah,
saw you actually that quote. I was just looking at your book and like I saw
yeah.
you say you want to be able to throw your grandkids up in the air.
Yeah, I want to
Yes,
be the
yeah.
favorite grandmother. Like
Sure.
I totally want to be the favorite. So I'm training for that moment. If I ever am blessed to join that club to be grandmother, I would be honored to do that. And I
I
also
think
want,
grandparents got it made. It
yeah,
sounds awesome. You don't even
yeah.
have to do bedtime, feeding them, get them ice cream. Who
You could just leave
cares?
them with their parents. Like, all
Once they're
right.
all
Right.
jazzed up,
Yeah.
just get them out. I'm going home.
Exactly
Yeah.
Peace
right.
out.
Exactly right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's sort of how I think about female aging is like we've
Yeah.
probably evolved our capacity for that long life is probably related to being a grandmother or just embedded in our community to help out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was expecting out of that, but I think you nailed that answer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. It's like kind of the framework I work through of like solving all of my own. It's like a solid framework for me to ask my own questions of like, what does my body really need?
Yeah.
Um, Kind of going back to the beginning before all the niceties existed, but I never really think about it from like the biological menopausal perspective. I'm just not there yet. So I'm like,
Yeah.
how does that play into like really why this exists?
Yeah.
Is- Um, I think it's also strange on the like we talk a lot about the physical side of that, but the mental changes that go through from being a fertile female to losing essentially like the biological function of what is like creates life. That's like
Yeah.
a massive shift in just who you are as a person. Um,
And there's
is
grieving that happens with that. I
yeah.
mean, there has to be some grief
Like, what if we
around
just
that.
woke up as males one day and they're like, sterile, sorry, we
Right.
just don't do this anymore. Like,
Right.
it'd be I feel like my dad's going through it at his old age of like reverse puberty, where he's just an
Mhm.
old man now. And
Oh,
Right.
he's
my
like,
wife would. You better figure that mess out. That's not an option. That's not
yeah,
an option.
I hope
So,
he's not listening to the show.
I mean,
No.
my
Yeah,
wife would be like, figure that out, boy. Yeah.
he always he texts me. He's like, dude, I don't know. Testosterone just doesn't exist anymore. He's like,
Mm.
I'm just
Yeah.
old. I'm like, dude, you
Yeah.
need to go get on that fake
Like
testosterone then.
imagine your wife had like at one
Shit.
point, like she just all of a sudden has more testosterone than you. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a reframe. It's a total pattern interrupt than what you're used to, and that's what happens in
Yeah.
menopause. Like your partner will literally have more estrogen than you, if you're not on HRT, if you're not on hormone replacement therapy or menopausal
I
hormone
would
therapy.
immediately get on it. I would immediately get on it. Yeah.
I know.
The
Well,
heck with that.
that's the thing. That's the thing. I love that you said that because I think that there's a stigma with men on TRT. I think that it's less so, but I still think that it's like, oh, he's on anabolic, he's on, faking it or whatever.
I don't
And I
care.
think that, yeah. Well, I love see that. I
Yeah.
love that about you because I think that there are so many women that are like, oh, well, menopause is it's a natural thing, and it's like, okay. So bacteria and viruses are also part of the natural world. Have you ever taken an
Yeah.
antibiotic? Like,
No doubt. Yeah. Yeah.
so
What about
removing the
cancer?
shame.
You know what I mean? You have don't take chemotherapy then. I mean, like,
Right, right,
what's
right.
medicine for? Shit.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I love that freedom. Like you do not, you have not sort of shackled your mind around some of these limitations, which is
no.
lovely. And I think if we can get more people to think like you, I think that would be wonderful, both from the TRT for men and women. TRT also very
Yeah.
controversial still for women at the time of this
Yeah.
recording, which is crazy. And HRT at large, like in general, is often very controversial and it's hard. Like women really have to advocate for themselves. They have to ask multiple times, often change healthcare providers. It's difficult. It's difficult to get what they need.
That's
Yeah.
too bad.
Well, conversations like
It's
this help, right? Like if there's men that are
yeah.
listening and they have a woman who's struggling, there can be a conversation and there can be something that can, something that can come from it. So maybe she can start, listening to all the episodes that you guys put out. They can listen to my show and then they can start to be able to advocate for themselves in these
Yeah.
situations. But that is absolutely what is necessary. Yeah.
To
Agreed.
really help all of our listeners, specifically the male ones, how should we as husbands show up as you are entering perimenopause?
Honestly, just listening to conversations like this and having some empathy for her. Like you don't need to change anything.
I struggle with that second one. I
I
really do.
know, I know.
You
Have you
said
ever seen
that
that
word that I
video?
suck at.
Have you ever seen that video with the I think it's called like the nail or something? Have you ever seen this one? I'll
No.
send it to you guys. Make sure you put
Yeah.
it in the show notes too. It's there's a girl, she has basically like a nail coming out of her head. And he's like, "Well, why don't you just pull the nail out of your head?" And she's like, I don't want a solution. I just want you to listen to me." And he's like, okay."
But you have
And
a
she's like,
nail in your head.
"Sometimes when I'm putting a sweater on, it gets snagged and I get these headaches." And he's like, "Well, just take the thing out of your head." Like he wants to
Yeah.
fix it, right? And so
It is
the whole
hard, man.
it's
It's hard.
hard. It's hard when you're a fixer and you're a protector and you're a male who loves his woman and wants to see her happy and thriving. It's very tempting to get in there and be like, let me just put this, let me just organize this for you. So I would just say, listen to her. Don't try to fix it. Have her listen to this conversation, and then maybe you both afterwards can have a like, what did you think about the show? What did you think about what he was saying?
Yeah.
What did you think about what she was saying? And then have a conversation about it.
Agreed.
And then
Yeah.
maybe you can come up with a game plan from there, like talking to your healthcare provider, finding
Yeah.
a provider who has menopausal or perimenopausal training, that kind of thing. Hiring a trainer at the gym. Like there's so many different ways that she can advocate for herself, like on her own in the gym. They can start working out together. Like there's so many different ways and beautiful ways that men and women can sort of collaborate and problem solve together. But I will say, yeah, like coming at it, if you're a guy and you're like, well, let me just fix this for you. Usually you're either your head's gonna be taken off, right?
Yeah.
So just like have some empathy, understand what's
Yeah.
happening for her, and then like just invite some conversation. Like, what do you think? Like, what did you think about that? How'd that sound to you? Good, bad, ugly? Like, what's your thoughts?
Bros, next week on Barbell Shrugged shows on empathy. I need a coach.
But yeah, and none of us are going to say anything. Somebody, we got to get somebody else. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Stephanie, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to compliment you all again. Like I just feel like you having the courage to have a conversation like this and to listen to me in the way that you have and to let me sort of go off on all the tangents, like it's very impressive. And I think that your followers, I hope that your followers also see that in you, because you three are also helping change the narrative and the game for women in perimenopause as well. So I just wanted to thank you and send my congrats and like hat tip. It's hard to have these. It's hard to talk about blood and it's hard to talk about all these like estrogen and testosterone and sex, and it's hard to talk about those things. They can still sort of be a little bit controversial in a way, but you all have the open-mindedness and the curiosity, which I think is required for change.
Oh man, I love talking about sex. Man.
Yeah, there he is. Where can people find more about you, working with you, your book, all the places?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So the book is you can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, where all books are sold. It's called The Betty Body. You can find me. I have
wait. Hold on a second. You're
Yes.
going to be my new Barnes and Noble bragging to my kids. One of my favorite things to do is take my kids to Barnes and Nobles and bring them to the fitness section. And I'm like, look at all of daddy's friends. You want to know about that person? You know them. They think I'm cool. It's
I love
awesome.
that.
Audible
Now
too.
you're my
I mean,
newest celebrity on the shelves at Barnes and Noble.
I love that.
You're on Audible.
Yeah,
I just saw
Audible.
that. That's what I'm getting. I'm an Audible guy.
Yeah, and I read. So I also did the. So I spoke for the Audible. So that's me. So Audible. You can find.
Cool.
I have a podcast called Better with Dr. Stephanie, and the whole
Saw that.
premise of the show is like you don't have to be the best, you just got to be better. So how can we be better through conversations with thought leaders and scientists, and like what does it mean to have a well-lived life? There's that. And then anything else, you can find me on drstephaniestima.com. We have newsletters, we have a lot of free content that we give. There's a blog there. So drstephaniestima.com for if you want to join our newsletter. It's called the Menopause, my play on menopause. So we have a weekly roundup of action items for women.
Very cool. Coach Travis Mash.
Matchley.com. That was awesome. So, Dr. Stephanie, I took a lot of notes. I'm not going to tell them to my wife, but I'm definitely going to say maybe you might want to listen to
leading question.
Maybe listen to this if you want to.
Yeah, if you would
like. You don't have to.
Yeah, if you would like.
If you would like. But you don't have to. I'm not saying it's for you.
Yeah.
But
yeah, exactly. That's the best way to do it. I love it.
I love you, Emily Drew. I love you. Yeah.
Thank you. This was great. This was so awesome.
Mash, tell the people.
Oh, Matchley.com.
Yeah,
if you want the velocity, jimware.com. But go buy Dr. Stephanie's book. Yeah, I'm going to.
There we go. Douglas E. Larson.
There you go. I'm not going to have to soft pitch this to my wife at all. I'm just going to be like, go listen to that show. And she's going to be like, okay, cool. Thank you. It's going to be easy conversation. You can find me on Instagram, Douglas E. Larson. I didn't say this on the show, but it wasn't until the last couple of years that I put together that menopause is like almost on par with like going through puberty again with the level of change that happens where everyone understands puberty. It's like everyone gets it because everybody went through it. That's in their 20s and 30s and beyond, where you understand that before you're one person, during it, you're kind of another person figuring out who the hell you are. And then afterward, you're yet again a different person. And that having that understanding that menopause is really quite similar in that respect, I think is going to make it radically easier to support my wife through the transition. So, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective with us, because I'm going to be a better husband for having listened to your thoughts today. So appreciate you.
You better hold him to that, Marcy. If you're listening to this show, you heard Doug say he's going to be a better husband, which means currently he's not being the best.
She's going to think, how could he be a better husband?
I doubt it.
He's over there.
Yeah. I doubt there's one person on this podcast that couldn't be a better husband right now, right? Like,
he's about to.
I got room to grow
right here. Already perfect throughout this whole thing. I'm just.
I would ask your wife. Yeah, I want to ask her.
I'm Anders Varner at Anders Varner, and we are Barbell Shrugged at Barbell_Shrugged. And make sure you get over to rapidhealthreport.com. That is where you can find about all the lab, lifestyle, performance testing. Maybe if you're a professional athlete, you can work with Travis Mash because he's awesome. And learn about all the programs. Come and work with us. Schedule a call. You can access all of that over at rapidhealthreport.com. Friends, we'll see you guys next week.